St. Luke's Church. It's also called Bombed Out Church because of the damage in World War II. In 6th of May in 1941, the Luftwaffe dropped an incendiary device and hit the church, and eventually caused a large fire. The roof were lost, stained glass windows only fragments remain, the organ destroyed, and the clock dropped. And our miserable main character also fell to the ground on this day, the bells. Before I start this research about St. Luke's Church, I didn't realize change ringing is an art that is full of knowledge and technique. I thought it's just somebody or a machine hit the bell and that's all. I didn't know every change ringing there are so many change ringer and many practice behind this. Traditionally, church bells were used to be call worshipper to the church 3 times a day, 6 a.m., 12 at noon, and 6 p.m., and also rung on special occasions like wedding, funeral. The bells are usually tuned as a diatonic scale, so each bell have its own pitch. When the bells were rung, it sounds like a song-like melodies. The bells are mounted within bell frame. There is a clapper inside the bell. A rope is tied to a wheel and hangs down to the bell ring. When the ringer pulls on the rope, the bells swing, and the clapper inside will strike the bell, thereby sounding the bell. Bell ringers typically stand in a circle around the ringing chamber, each managing one rope. Bells and their attendant ropes are so mounted that the ropes are pulled in a circular sequence, usually clockwise. This circle enabled ringers to accurately ring continually changing sequence, known as changes. Handbell nowadays is quite popular as an instrument. It were originally used by change ringers to rehearse outside their towers, because it's not easy to practice in the tower at usual day. It may cause noise. When we talk about the birth of St. Luke's Church bells, we should change the location from Liverpool to Manchester. The bells were first made for All Saints Newton Heath Church, which was built between 1814 and 1816 in Manchester. The bells were made by William Dobson of Downham Market, made with metal bell frame, claimed to be the first bell which used metal as bell frame. This was a peal of 8, and the bell inscribed words on it, and words on triple bell was peace and good neighborhood. But ironically, it eventually brought many disputes and argued to its neighborhood. The bells were not start with peaceful opening like other stories. It had been expressed regarding the stability of the tower. All Saints Newton Heath Church was not suitable for the bell, although an architect proposed that we build the tower to fit those bells, but some people explained their aversion to cast iron frame. The bells were abandoned at the very beginning of the story. Because of the church had nothing to do with the bells, the builders of churches held an auction to sell those bells in 1828, and at last it sold to a man called Frederick Fincham. But after he purchased those bells, he sold it to Liverpool Corporation within a month. It is quite strange, because we don't know any common points between Mr. Fincham and Liverpool Corporation. Maybe he worked as an agent for Liverpool Corporation, maybe not. At the same year, St. Luke's Church completed the construction work. It was intended that St. Luke's Church would be the corporation showpiece, and it was even to be considered a candidate for the Cathedral Church of the new Liverpool Diocese. And that's why Liverpool Corporation gave those bells to St. Luke's Church as a gift. Because of its origin, of course there was some aroused comments, but fortunately, seems like most of the residents of Rodney Street were expecting those new bells, so everything went well at the very beginning. The residents nearby were quite welcome those bells in first few months, but after that, those bells became unpopular and nuisance. Some residents even sent complaint letter to town council, and it reported on the Liverpool Mercury. It stated annoyance to be so intolerable as to threaten serious injury to property in the neighborhood. It is consumed that because of the iron frame, those bells produce strong, powerful sound, and it annoyed the residents of Rodney Street. They want those bells to be taken down. Even St. Luke himself felt sorry about it. I, by reason of my modest youth, am not so deserving of attention. After that, there was some suggestion to improve the tower, like boarding off the windows halfway up or blocking off the window on the Rodney Street side. But eventually the bells were seldom rung after 1829, and between 1836 to 44, those bells remained entirely silent. In 1844, Liverpool Corporation entered into a new contract of St. Luke's Church with Mr. Ralph Rushton. He promised the bells would be rung on a regular basis. The Era reported that the bells of St. Luke's Church reopened and rung for public worship on 22nd December in 1844, with assistance from St. Peter's Society, which are bell ringer from St. Peter's Church. But in 1871, the corporation stopped the ringers' payment. Many of St. Luke's Church bell ringer left. There are only 3 remained loyal to the bells. St. Luke's Church rung again, but still not full service, since the shortage of bell ringer. On 20th of December in 1879, St. Luke's Church bells was featured on the cover of Church Bell, and it mentions those iron frame in the description. Discussion about the material of bell frame started again. Should it be using wood or metal? There was an article on Bell News in 1903. It was wrote by Pritchard. He gave few questions to the bells, assuming that the frame was, if not the first one, of the earliest of its type. Was it seen as an experimental design? Was it regarded as a success? Why didn't the idea catch on until many years later? Were there installation difficulties? Did the frame cost too much when compared with the traditional timber one? He also gave some suggestions to improve the design of the bells, but then it seems no follow-up to it. The bells only gave limited service at its late life. At last, during World War II in 1941, May Blist boomed. Roof lost, bells dropped, 5 of them dropped, and the other 3 cracked. That's the end of the bells story. The bells are eventually not rung for many times, and his life was miserable, pathetic. Of course, they were just bells. They can't control their own fortune, but the bells were born with expectation, and the bells should be proud of the church because of the iron bell frame. Unfortunately, they were not welcomed by the people at that time, and it brought disputes to the neighborhood. In its whole life, didn't use often for church service. The bells finally destroyed during the war, buried in the rubble. This is the final story of this tragic character.